Okay. All right.
I can't hear you. Your mic's.
All right, guys. So thank you for joining us for our um, fourth session on Unofficial Sitecore training. Uh, you know us, so we have Mike, who no one knows about. You have me, and I don't know how many people know about me, but we have a new person joining in this time, Camrose. Camrose has been part of the community for a while. He does a lot of great things. Apart from that, he is the one and only Coveo MVP, uncontested so far. And these are our links to our LinkedIn, Twitter, and our blog. Please do check them out. All right. So, Cam, you want to say a little bit about the Stack Exchange?
Yeah, sure. So hopefully you guys have heard we have managed to get the Stack Exchange site for Sitecore, and so this is very specific Sitecore site. It's kind of like Stack Overflow, but very focused just on Sitecore, which this was an initiative that was launched by Mark Cassidy, and he's put a great deal of effort into promoting this, getting it past its initial internal beta phase, and now it's in public beta. So if you have any questions about Sitecore that you need help with, this is the place to come and ask. And the great thing about Stack Exchange, as opposed to Stack Overflow, is that it's not just about programming. So if you have some questions about the marketing features of Sitecore, then come and join us over here.
All right, awesome. So the next is the Sitecore Slack. Mike, you want to say a little bit about Sitecore Slack?
Sure. So the Sitecore Slack is a community chat room out there with multiple channels geared toward different topics within Sitecore. And we also have some fun channels such as Random, where you can post funny animated GIFs and things like that. I definitely would recommend that people jump on this. If you're not on it, then please reach out to any three of us on here, and we can send you an invite. We just need your email address. And please make sure you're not a recruiter, because we won't let you in. But anyways, yeah, come online. I think we're close to about 1,400 members now. People distributed all over the world, and definitely, come on in, learn, and have some fun.
All right, awesome. All right, so the other part which we started recently is the Sitecore community update. So basically, in order to communicate with all the Sitecore resources around the world right now, there is no real way to do it. We have to depend on Sitecore and go through a lot of approvals to send emails out to keep people informed, because not everyone is on Twitter or on Facebook or on LinkedIn. So it seems like the messages get to the people pretty late. Email seems to be the best form of it. So we started as part of the unofficial Sitecore training. We already have a ton of emails, but we unfortunately, because of the way we worded it, we can't really use that. So we started this mailing list so people can sign up for it to get updates on what's happening in the community. Like, hey, we need more people to start answering questions on Stack Overflow, or hey, there's going to be this live streaming of a session, things of that sort. So if you get a chance, please go and sign up for the newsletter. All right, so the purpose of the training series, so I think we've gone through it every single time, but I'll go through it for the purpose of this video. Essentially, we were tired of the way projects were being built, .NET developers being pushed into Sitecore development, and we wanted to do something which was free. We wanted to do something where we reach these people so we can teach them at least the basic things they need to do in Sitecore, so that we on the other end are not fixing horrible implementations for the lack of knowledge. And that's how this whole thing got started. So Mike and I wanted to impart this knowledge. So we never intend to or ever will say that we know everything. It's just something we're trying to share. And just like how we have Camrose for this session, we plan on bringing in other people for other sessions who spend a lot of time on things on those topics, so they can give their idea of how they would do the development and train you guys that way. So hopefully that'll be useful to you guys. Mike, this is your slide.
That's right. Because seriously, at the end of the day, one doesn't simply master Sitecore. It takes, I would say, years of just experience, practice, and even just continuous learning to get to a point where you feel like you're comfortable on developing good solutions. But even at the end of the day, none of the panelists here are considered experts. I don't think the word expert exists. I don't think there are experts, but we're all trying to improve, every day, getting better, moving forward. Next slide.
All right, this is yours too.
Because really, at the end of the day, we don't want people to just throw things over the, cube wall and say, well, it's done. It's not my problem. Have somebody else support it. Really, we kind of want to like catch these things way before we release it out there for people to test or even into production. Next slide.
All right, so the overview for this session is to mainly go over the presentation part of Sitecore. In the previous sessions, we covered the other aspects, and presentation is one of the basic ones you do have to know everything about. All the different aspects. You don't have to master everything. You could from time, after one after another, but you do need to know what kind of options you have in that, as well as some basic admin duties you need to do in order to be able to install a module, or the admin pages you have access to in order for you to do things. So, saying that, we come to our first part, which is types of renderings. And I am going to transfer my presentation to Camrose.
So before you jump over to that, let me kind of speak to some of these. So basically, you have what, 5 renderings here. Basically, I remember like back in the day there were actually more, but I'm going to say that the common ones here, if you use the Sitecore MVC, would be controller rendering and view rendering. The other 3, basically, I've never really had to use them ever. 2 of them, I don't even know what they are. But I guess with the controller rendering, it kind of, you can consider it a controller in MVC where you can have logic within an action. A view rendering is more like a place where you can have markup, and basically you have no logic. Please don't ever put logic in a view rendering because that's not where it belongs. Really, you might want to use it for a placeholder in Sitecore so that you can put things within the placeholder which will have container, let's say HTML. As for the item rendering, there are some blogs out there. I think we're going to distribute some links maybe later on after the broadcast, kind of highlighting how you might use an item rendering. But as for the method in your renderings, I couldn't find anything about these. If you do, please blog it and share it with the community, because sharing with the community only enriches all of us. All right, Cam, it's all yours.
So I'll just show you these where these renderings live. So within Sitecore, all the renderings and the layouts and everything all sit under this layout section of the tree. And how well you can see this. So they all sit in here, basically. With all the MVC types, they all sit under renderings. The sub-layouts are a legacy thing, I'd say. It's where the old ASCX web controls would have sat. Really try to avoid those if you can. But anywhere in the renderings, you can, if you go to the folders, you'll see all the different types of renderings that are available here. So Mike just spoke of the view rendering here and the controller rendering, which are the 2 main types that you're really going to be interested in for the majority of your projects. Just a hint, try to keep all your renderings in a project-specific folder. Don't try to mix it up with any of the other folders that are already there. And as you can see, I've organized the renderings and the controllers for this demo into smaller sections. These possibly aren't the best named folders, but it will show you, just for the purposes of this demo, what kind of things we can do. I will go over all of this at the end in one go to show you how everything fits and give you a fuller demo. For now, we'll continue with the rest of the slides, and we'll come back and everything will tie back together and flow much more nicely.
Sorry. Okay, so data sources. So you guys might be saying, what is a data source? Well, in the intermediate gift, that's not exactly what it is, but that's data from Star Trek. So a data source is basically, it's a Sitecore item, just like everything in Sitecore. You would use that to basically be the data source for your rendering. So within presentation components, or even within the page editor, which we'll talk about, you can associate an item with a rendering that you have on your page item, and basically that's going to be the source of data for the rendering. Why would you want to do this? Well, at the end of the day, it just makes things cleaner, but also it kind of sets you up to enable personalization on your items via Sitecore XDB. It's very important to basically do this. Don't always rely on the context item as the source of your data. Next. All right, what's a placeholder? A placeholder basically is, well, it's an item just like everything else in Sitecore, but it's basically something that says, hey, we only want to allow certain, renderings into a certain placeholder that's set within, let's say, a view rendering, or even just any sort of place that you have markup. You want to do this because you want to you kind of like, let's say, restrict what can go into a certain area, within the markup, because it could break the page if you put something in there that doesn't belong, or it may not even be styled properly. So you kind of want to lock it down, because you want to, like, say, hey, let's say you have like a left sidebar, and you have some kind of nav there. Let's say you just want to lock it down to that nav. You would basically, on a placeholder setting, you would basically say, hey, I just want that particular rendering to go in there. You don't want to put other things in there because it just may not make sense. Next. So what's the page editor? So the page editor is like where all the magic happens for people to actually build up pages. It's actually really called the experience editor today. Page editor is a legacy name that no longer is used. You could use it, I think, pre-Sitecore 7.5, but really at the end of the day, it's kind of the same thing, except I think the newer version of the experience editor may be better. It just allows, non-technical users, it gives them the ability to edit content right on the page as if it was just a web page. It gives them that power without having to, know how to, map a, let's say, rendering to, presentation details within the content editor. And it also gives them the ability to, put those renderings in placeholders via, of course, there's going to be restrictions via the placeholder settings, but all that magic happens right in the page editor. And we're going to see an example of that. Kim, I don't know if you're in a position to show the page editor.
Yes, I can.
Yeah, I say we just show some just like a quick overview of like what it looks like and what you can do with it and all that good stuff.
Sure. Sure. So as we saw earlier in the early demo, this is the content editor. So this is generally how old solutions would have been built, predominantly built from within here. So if you go to any of the pages, you'll see all the content on those pages. You'll have some information about that page, but generally all the content would have been entered in a kind of tabular kind of format. The experience editor is accessible from the publish tab for some weird reason. But if you open that, this is essentially your page, and you can interact with a page in a kind of what you see is what you get kind of way. I've got some additional things here to try and help separate the components and stuff in Experience Editor mode, and we'll see how it looks without that a bit later on. But this will allow you to add components and additional components at a smaller level. It also allows you to do things like edit the content. And if you have more specialized fields, it will give you a pop-ups for those types of fields. Not everything is editable directly from within the Experience Editor, but yeah, you can do all sorts of things that you would normally do from the content editor as well, but as well as going into this type of thing. And there you go, content is available. There's things like the media library if we need to add items into here. I've got my imagery. There you go. And it's now official.
All right, I'm gonna give it back to Mike. Do you
I don't
want
know if I missed this, but did you show the edit frame?
The what, sorry?
An edit frame example, or did I miss that?
I haven't shown an edit frame example. I do have some coming up.
Okay,
I'll
great.
do that in the, yeah.
Wonderful. All right, parameter templates. So what exactly are these? So basically, these would be, basically you can consider them settings for your, let's say your rendering. So, you can put fields on these. They need to inherit from special template. I think it's called standard rendering parameters. And they are just like sets up magic behind the scenes, so it allows you to set this, for your rendering so that it will just show up. So basically, you can define some fields. Let's say, I don't know, as an example would be background color. You could put a background color for a rendering, and maybe give, I don't know, some kind of drop list to say, hey, I want it to be blue, I don't know, red, green, whatever. And then from that data can be pulled into the front end, where you can maybe set that, as inline CSS or a class, or whatever it may be, on your HTML tag that would be appropriate to hold that. How do you edit them? Well, you can't really edit them directly. You kind of have to, edit them on the actual presentation details, I believe. Why is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? Well, it depends on how you look at it. So in terms of it being a good thing, it's basically a way where you can put content, like settings content associated with your rendering, inside of Sitecore, so you don't have to hard code this stuff in code. A con of this, which is an unfortunate thing, is that you can't use it for personalization. It just won't work. I would say when or why would you use this? Well, you want to use it, kind of like I alluded to it already, but you'd use it in a case where you want to give people the ability to change things without having to change code, but also realize if you need this stuff to be personalized via XDB, don't use it. Next slide. Actually, do we have an example of that, Kim?
Of the parameter templates, yes.
Yeah, I think we should show that.
Yeah. So back to the same demo page. So here I've got a 4-column container, and I've got 4 little widgets in here. And to edit these, I click on the More button, click Edit Properties, and so these are the default settings of placeholders and the data source, which I've selected. But I've got a set of styles here, so blue, green, red defaults. So it was blue, so I set that to red, and take a different icon. So what my icons are not showing up. Is that? And then, as you can see, this is now changed to a red one. Just as easily do that on another component, green. Let's have a look at cart, shall we? And as you can see, there's a little icon. See, I can't edit this icon from within the experience editor because these are on the rendering parameters. Shall I do a demo and then we'll go back onto the admin pages? Does that sound good?
Yeah, that's probably better, cameras. I'm just gonna give it back to you 1 second.
Yeah. All right, so I'll run you through all these slides we've discussed. I know we've kind of gone through these fairly quickly, but I'll run through these and hopefully it'll make a lot more sense. So obviously, to start off with, we need a layout. So I've created a real basic layout here, which sits in this index folder. I've created a bunch of renderings, which I showed you very briefly earlier, and I'll go through these as well. I've set up a bunch of templates as well, and so I've got some component templates. So these are essentially what is going to be our data sources for our components. So you see these just inherit from a standard template. There's nothing else going on here. So within these, we can just add whatever fields we need. One important thing about data sources is generally they don't have any layout associated with them. I think the only one which you would want to add a layout to is the item rendering type, because the item rendering will pull the layout from the data source item itself rather than adding a rendering and then attaching a data source to it. I've created a couple of real basic pages, just a generic page and an article page, and just for the purposes of this demo. So let's just show you a very, very simple rendering. So this is a view rendering, as you can see. And all we've got to do is point this to the path of our rater file. And there's no other restrictions placed on here. Apart from setting a data source location. It's in a GUID format, but in this demo, they are all pointing to this folder here. Where the IDs should match. And the other option which we have had to set is the data source template. The reason for setting these is the component is expecting certain data, certain fields to be there, so that needs to match what the template is going to be able to hold. I also have another one here where I have set up compatible renderings, and this will allow you to switch between different types of renderings where particularly the data source is matched or at least compatible. The one thing to mention here about the data source template is this: you can either set a individual item, but you can also pipe in some locations, or so you could have multiple locations here if you have shared content and global content, for example. So that will allow you to reuse data in multiple ways. If you're working, particularly if you're working on a multi-site implementation, this will also accept queries as well. So if you want to have some what we call page-specific data, or you can also use XPath in here as well to set these locations. We also have some controller renderings here. So controller renderings are very, very similar, except that it uses a controller rendering template type. The fields on this item are different, so you'll need to specify the controller you want to use. In our example here, you'll notice that the widget is called widget controller, but in Sitecore we've only specified a widget. You don't need the controller part of the name. You also need to specify the controller action, so that's essentially the method that it's going to call on this controller, related content, so that will match this one. I have a couple of others. So I have a grid. There's 4 column, 3 column, and 2 column for this demo. And I also have a couple of other controls, just very, very simple ones. So I'll jump back to this view. As you can see, I've got Sitecore rocks open, and again, these will just match what I just showed you in Sitecore. I've structured these in the view folder in a similar fashion to what we have in Sitecore. So this will make the components a bit easier to find and work on. So the widget ones. So this is the feature widget rendering. This one here. As you can see, it's very, very simple. It just has a bit of razor markup in here, and I have a glass model which matches my Sitecore templates. And these are just hooked up as editable fields in here. So it's literally just intertwining your HTML with the fields from glass. And these are all very, very similar. So here's another one with an image. Just literally has one extra field in here. Notice that they both share the same model interface in this instance, but they share the same model. And we have a few others which I will show you shortly. And the grids, which I mentioned earlier. Again, just very, very straightforward HTML. And here I have specified a couple of placeholders. So what these placeholders do is they're essentially an area of the page. We saw this earlier here. These are areas of the page which will allow me to add controls into. And placeholders are, jump back into Sitecore. Placeholders are specified under the placeholders settings section of the layouts. Again, I recommend you place these in a project-specific folder, or just help separate from default Sitecore. And in our, so we specified two placeholders here, a left column and a right column, and I have the same here. The placeholder keys need to match. And in older versions of Sitecore, there was an issue where if you specified like left column here with capitals, it would convert it to lowercase in one case, but not in another case. So recommend you just keep everything lowercase. It will make your life a lot easier. And we also have a field here called allowed controls. And what this allowed controls does is in the experience editor, when you add the controls and the pop-up appears, it will show whatever allowed controls you have set here. So different placeholders here have different allowed controls, and this will help allow us to restrict what type of content we want where. I have a demo page here. Let's go show you what that looks like in the experience editor. So my templates have been set up already to have the header and the footer already displayed. I could, in theory, add more or other types of content. I won't because I don't really want a double header, but that is possible. So the easiest way to see where your placeholders are is to use these add component buttons from the ribbon. And in my main placeholder, which is main content placeholder, I have restricted the allowed types of control to all of these. So there's quite a lot here. And here you can see all these controls. So let's add that to column. And you can see I've got a left column and a right column, which I've defined in the code. And you can see the left column will only allow me to add this one feature widget. And because I had specified the data source location and the data template earlier, I can now go and select an existing piece of content that I've already created, or I can create a new one. And here you go, simple as that, it's been added. And we can edit that content in the experience editor as so. With the fields like the rich text type fields, like I showed you earlier, we do have this extended pop-up, which will allow us to have greater control over the text, as well as give us options like inserting cycle media. Let's take that one up actually. Probably a bit big, but we've got a demo. So with the right column, as you can see, we have two different types of controls. So the placeholder settings are different here. So let's add a feature widget with an image. And again, I can create a new one, or I can select an existing one. So if I pick this generic content once, notice that it won't let me add that because this rendering and this data template are not compatible. So if I pick another one, this one I created earlier, that's fine. I can go and add that in. There you go, there's actually again. That's all well and good. So one of the features I showed you earlier was the compatible renderings. So when you have a compatible rendering set, the icon will appear in the web edit toolbar. You can see for this feature widget, I haven't set one, so it doesn't appear. But for this one, I can select that. I've only defined one compatible rendering, and selecting that. It has changed. It actually looks the same, but it has changed because those two controls are actually the same. But So one other thing I want to show you in here before I move on to slightly more complex requirement is the use of the placeholders. So I've added another control here just to show you, just for a bit of separation. But if I go and add another 2-column control, as you can see, it's exactly the same as the first one. And the reason for this is Sitecore sees the placeholder key as unique. So you can't add the same controls, same placeholders in the same location over and over again. Now this is kind of a bit of a problem, right? Because for a design like this, I want to add additional components and I want to make them unique, but it's not doing what I would expect it to do. So the way this is solved is to use what we call dynamic placeholders. There are a number of articles that you can find. Just type Sitecore dynamic placeholders, and they'll provide you the code and the how they work, why we need them. You can also, so in this project, I've added this as a sample. You can use this dynamic placeholders package. It's just a NuGet package. So if you're using MVC, just grab the link from here. I'll take here it's NuGet.org, and you can install that in your project. I've added a number of these references. Just show you the packages in this project. So that's this one here by Jason Burt, and I believe Richard Seal works on these as well. And this will allow us to have multiple controls. So let's go and add a 3-column. And I'll show you the code for the 3-column. The only difference between the 3-column and the 4-column is this. It's this dynamic placeholder here. A Sitecore placeholder is like so, and this package adds this dynamic placeholders. And 3 columns. So this will allow us, notice that all these columns are exactly the same. They're all dynamic column 1. No difference in there. And as you can see, these are all being added as you'd expect them to be added. So then I'll select an existing data source. Go and add another 3-column. It behaves as you'd expect it to behave. Let's pick one with an image, shall we? So this is what most of us would expect to be normal behavior. I have also got a demo of the rendering parameters. Make that a bit, so we've got a bit more space. So the rendering parameters are like any other Sitecore item. So they look pretty much exactly the same. The template builder looks the same. They are just essentially they fit in the same places. The main difference here, though, is a regular page will inherit from a standard template, but a rendering parameters template needs to inherit from the standing rendering parameters template, and that's somewhere in here. It's easy to find in Sitecore Rocks. We'll post a link up of it later, but it's within the system folder. What we can then do is, once we've got that template, if we go to our rendering definition, we can then add into the parameters template field that rendering parameter. Once that is done, I don't know which controller I added this to now. It's an info column. So we've added our rendering parameters in here. That will allow us to go to the edit component properties, and this then matches my template definition in from the builder. So I've got a style, and I have an icon. One is drop link, and one is an image. The drop link, I showed you this earlier, so that's blue. If we go back to our component, this hatch component has now changed to blue, and the icon has now appeared. Now these are quite useful for making very, very minor changes. So things like background colors, possibly an icon, it's a bit controversial, probably not the best use, but mainly things like maybe a background color or aligning things from the left to the right or to the right. It gives users good control over slightly larger components. What you can't do with rendering parameters is to personalize this content. So if I wanted to run a test and say, if the user is from the US, then set this to blue, but if they're from the UK, then set it to green. You can't do that with rendering parameters. So you have to be a bit careful about when to use them, but they are useful, and obviously it's very, very important to know that it is possible to use these and why you can use them. Let's have another page. It's a blank page. I showed you the controller rendering earlier and showed you the fact that you have to specify what the controller is and what action to run on that controller. But just like view renderings, you can place some restrictions on this. So you can set data source locations, and you can also set the data source templates as well as the compatible renderings if you're able to switch between different types of controls and they have a compatible data template. They can also take rendering parameters. You need to access them slightly differently. I'll show you some code actually for both of these, how you access that using Glass. So this page has been restricted, and I'll show you why in a second. So let's add a related content widget, and I had one selected from earlier, so let's just add that. Very simple, it's just gone and ran some of my logic. These are editable. I've decided not to make these fields editable because they are summaries, it's a list. And what that is doing in the code is it will call this method here. I'm getting the data source. I inherited from the Glass controller in this instance. You should probably have your own controller and use dependency injection, that kind of thing, but I don't want to get into too much detail. But the Glass controller has a method called getDataSourceItem, and I tell it what type of item I'm expecting. I've then called a method to go and get some related items, and then I will pass that model to my view. And kind of like how we specified the view in the view rendering type, we also have to specify it in the controller action as well. So if we take a look at this, it's expecting a model, and then I'm up to the title and the subtitle, which are editable. And then I've just got a very, very simple for each loop, which runs through all my related items and just outputs them. I could have made these editable, just like here, but for this demo, I've decided not to. In this instance, my get related articles is just going and calling a property of the data template, and then just getting everything which is of type article page. And in our demo, it's just a bunch of sample pages that I've created. It's nothing special. So article pages 1 to 6, article page 1 to 6. I also have a demo of a controller. Let's create a new one. Hopefully this works. Put an error on this one. I'll reuse this one for the setup. So there's nothing showing here because I have some restrictions on this item. You can just as easily add the rendering parameters on the control like you can of view rendering. And let's take so now it's showing 3 items here. I had selected that to be product medium, and these are all product mediums. And this bit of code, what I'm doing is getting the data source. I'm also getting the rendering parameters, and this is my template type for my related content filter. It has a couple of fields on there, a tag and a display count. Again, I'm using a little method here just to go and grab everything that matches those tags. Not the best bit of code, and it's definitely, as Mike said earlier, definitely not the place to put this code. But again, it just works the same as the previous bit of code. The only difference is we have a view model because I'm passing through both of these items. Go ahead, one other property on here. Yeah, display counts. Let's change that to 1. Show you that it does take that into account. I mentioned earlier about the view rendering, and again, the class does have a method available in the view rendering if you needed to get the rendering parameters as well. As you can see, I'm just figuring out if class has been selected and adding that to the view. So one of the things that we talked about earlier was edit frames. Now, edit frames will kind of look like rendering parameters, but they're not. They allow us to target a field on the item, either the context item or the data source item, which normally cannot be edited in the experience editor. So things like text types of content is obviously very easily editable, same with images, same with links. I don't have an example of one here, but there are other types of items other types of fields which are a bit more tricky to edit. So things like checkboxes, drop lists, tree lists, multi-lists, that kind of thing. So this is where edit frames are really, really useful. So in my version, so on my related widget Datasource, we were editing the title and a subtitle, but this item also has 3 other fields on it. So one's a drop link, one's a checkbox, and one is a little tree list, just a little sample. It's not being used for anything, but it's just a little example of a control that you probably want to use a edit frame for. Up until recently, the edit frame was not available in MVC. I think Sitecore 8.2 introduces it, but for a while now, Glass has had the ability to set edit frames programmatically from your code, and that will work in MVC as well. So I've created a little button. I'll show you the code for this. So click on the little edit frame button. So these are the controls that I showed you a little bit earlier. Just to show you that I'm not lying. Check those and a couple of these. Probably to the break page, but going back to our content editor, now change the sample page. The checkbox was checked, and the selected items are now selected. So I'm going to hit that. And the way the edit frame works is real simple. Just need to use a Glass beginning edit frame. You pass in your model, you set a title, which we saw here, with this bit of text here, and then you just pass in the fields that you want to show. So I could just literally just show 2 fields. This page. And now we only have the 2 fields shown. So I'm just picking these up from my Glass model, which matches my template. Everything else is just fairly straightforward code. One thing you'll probably want to do is protect against outputting this edit frame in experience editor mode. I don't actually know what it will do if it is an experience editor mode and you don't have this, but it's worth putting these types of checks in place. So I'll show you one more demo, one more things. So on our 2 pages, editor, both pages share the same foundation for the code, and both of these have a main control. Find that one. So as you can see on a generic page type, I've got a lot more controls available to me. I've got 7 controls here. But on the article type page, I've only got 4. I've only got this 2 column and 3 column, and these 2 types of controls, whereas this had a bit more things here. I've got a 4 column and a generic content. So sometimes your pages are using the same bit of code. So in this code, both of these are using the same layout, which defines the main content. But I will want to restrict the type of control that I have on the home page versus the type of control I have on a generic page or an article page or a news page. But I don't really want to be going around creating lots of these types of pages or scaffolding like these, and then having a news dynamic and an article dynamic. I really want to keep my code base as light as possible and just override the settings on a per use case basis. So what we can do is create another placeholder and just call it the same thing. Put it in a different folder. I put it in an override folder and then put it in another folder, which in turn will describe what type of template it will be used on or what type of area it will be used on. And then you can set a different set of allowed controls in here. So if I then look at my article page and I go to the presentation details, and I edit these presentation details, I can look at the placeholder settings. And here I'll show you this from scratch. So here I can go and select my main article, main content override, specify the placeholder key, the same as the one you want to override. And now my article page has a different set of insert options, and I don't have to manage lots of different view renderings and placeholder keys and that kind of thing. And I have one other little example for you. So let's create a new one. So one other problem you have is with certain controls, the JavaScript kind of interferes with the editing experience. If I was to go and preview this page, this is a little slider control, but it's continuously rotating, but that kind of makes it a bit difficult to edit. So if I was to change this image or change this caption, then that kind of makes it a little bit tricky. So you need to cater for the experience editor sometimes, and you need to just tweak your JavaScript or the bit of CSS that you have. So one way around this is a carousel component or an accordion component or something which has a lot of JavaScript interactivity. Here's that. I've just hard-coded this for the example. You'd want to make this a normal view rendering with data sources. But add a couple of slides. There you go. So I can save that. Now it's not exactly as you see it on the front end. But if I go into normal mode, you can see it's working as you'd expect. If I wanted to take one of these components and just move those around to reorder them, again, I can save that. And as you'd expect, it's now starting as you'd expect. So just bear in mind that sometimes when you're doing this kind of thing, you might need to make slight little tweaks. So in this case, this uses a data attribute on the component to specify it's a carousel. So you might want to check that you're in Experience Editor editing mode and then set that accordingly. So in this case, I'm setting it to empty if it's in Experience Editor mode, or the correct attribute in normal mode, and I've specified that here. I think that's it. I think I've covered pretty much all my material, unless you guys want me to demo anything in particular or think I've missed anything.
Are you doing the admin? Are you doing the admin pages, Camrose? Or?
Ah, the admin pages, right? Yeah, I can show you the admin pages. Yeah. So, Sitecore admin pages. So, Sitecore has a bunch of admin pages. These do a whole bunch of weird and wonderful things. There are some blog posts. I wrote one recently on some admin pages that were added for Sitecore 8.2. So go to my site, do a search for it, and there's a whole list of these. So there's an index page, which is just loaded here. This gives you an overview of what each page is, what it does. Then you can give you clickable links. In earlier versions of Sitecore, so earlier than Sitecore 8.1 update 2, there is no index page, so you have to go to each page directly, which is a bit of a pain, but you just need to look on in the Sitecore folder, and they are all here. They're just regular SPX pages. But my page does list all the tools, what they do, how they work. There's also a couple of links at the top to a blog post by Nicola. I'll start with his name, I think. And Bjorn and a couple of other posts. So if you go to Nicola's one, it's got all the Sitecore 7. Earlier than 8.1 update 2 version, so there's a list of all of these there as well. I'll just show you a quick demo of some of these. So here's probably one of the oldest ones, the cache page. So if we go here, we can hit refresh. And this will show us how our cache is acting. So some of the important ones are obviously master when you're working in the content editor. We'll also have some web ones. Use website ones. Sorry. So if you have multiple websites, each one will have an entry here. You'll be able to see what the cache size is for the HTML. There's of course and various other as well for rendering parameters. If you're on old ASPX, there's a view state one. Haven't really used this. But also keep an eye on the web items, because that will tell you if your cache sizes are set incorrect, if it's getting too close to this too often. You can edit these values, obviously. There's a bunch here for stats. So event queue stats, keep an eye on this. The event queue should be getting cleared every so often. As you can see, mine is, no, it's not big. It's 499. Keep an eye on these. If it gets too big too often, then something in the background isn't running properly. Sitecore does run cleanup tasks every 4 hours, but you can run the cleanup task from here. There's a database selector for each type of, for each particular database. There's also some rendering statistics to show you some info on how long certain pages are taking to render. All useful stuff, particularly when you're trying to troubleshoot, see how your code is acting and behaving, and where potential bottlenecks are in your code. There's also a publish queue statistic, so if you want to see how your publishing queue is acting, take a look in here. You can do some cleanup here as well for items waiting to be cleared. Some of these pages do have some additional JavaScript at the top, which will make it refresh every specified seconds. The show config, always really, really useful. So this will show you the entire config after it has all been patched in. So if you have custom configurations, then you need to see if it's been added in. You'll be able to see them. So, for example, if you added some additional event handlers, they'd be added here. I am running live mode. So I'm currently running in live mode. So the content database. The database is set to master. That has been patched in. So this is how the final site will look. If you have additional sites, these will appear here. If you have additional pipeline processors, event handlers, if you've updated the cache settings, if you look at this page, it will show you what that final config is that Sitecore is using, loading and using internally. So there's a whole bunch of pages here. Have a read through them. Have a read of my blog post. You'll find more information on there. There is also an update installation page. That's accessible on here as well. Now, if you have some update packages, or for example, a Sitecore update package or a module which requires an update package, we've generated something from TDS. You can pick them up from here and use this update installation wizard to install them. The update installation wizard is slightly different from the package installer that you access from the desktop, the installation wizard here. The installation wizard is expecting zip packages. The update installation package is expecting .update files that you can go ahead and analyze that, and then there's an install option on there that will give you a whole bunch of information on what the analysis result will be, so tell you what it's going to do with the items that it's deploying. And then I can obviously go ahead and install that package, and it'll give me a report at the end of it. The update installation package can contain items and files. So the package I just installed, is installing all of these files as well, as you can see. And that's it, I think.
So, thank you everybody for attending. Definitely we're going to be following it up with some links for further information about different things. And we look forward to seeing you for the next session. Jack, keep an eye out on that because we don't have a date definitely defined for that, but definitely something will be coming soon.
Right, and then we'll be posting the source as well as the video to the blog post soon. All right, guys, thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.